Spent 38 years as a high school woodshop teacher in Knoxville, Tennessee, and when I finally retired, I used every dollar I'd saved to buy a 12-acre property in the Smoky Mountain foothills. The kind of place where you can sit on a covered porch in the morning and watch the mist lift off the ridgeline without a single sound, except birds and wind. Then my son-in-law called and said he'd already talked to a property management company about converting my barn into a rental venue. He said I should be grateful someone was finally making the land productive. I didn't argue with him that day, but when he showed up 4 months later with a catering crew and a tent rental truck, he found something waiting for him that he hadn't planned for. The property had taken me 2 years to find. My wife, Eleanor, had always talked about retiring somewhere with enough land to breathe, somewhere we could grow a garden that wasn't just a few pots on a deck. She passed from pancreatic cancer 18 months before I found the place, and I almost didn't buy it. Standing in the realtor's office in Maryville with the purchase agreement in front of me, I thought about calling my daughter and asking what she thought. Then I thought about what Eleanor would have said, which was, stop waiting for permission and do the thing. I signed the papers on a Thursday in early April. The property was 11.8 acres off a county road about 20 minutes south of Townsend. A farmhouse built in 1962, solid bones, needs cosmetic work. A timber frame barn that had been used for hay storage, a creek that ran along the eastern edge of the property year-round, 7 acres of cleared pasture, and the rest in mixed hardwood forest climbing the slope toward the ridge. The realtor, a quiet woman named Pat who had been selling mountain property for 30 years, walked me to my truck afterward. Most of the people who buy out here, she said, they've been dreaming about it for decades. Take your time settling in. The land will tell you what it wants to be. I liked that. I pocketed the keys and drove out to the property alone. The farmhouse needed paint, new kitchen appliances, and a bathroom renovation that I mostly did myself over the first month. I'd spent 4 decades teaching teenagers to measure twice and cut once, and I still had the tools and the patience for careful work. The barn I left mostly as is, sweeping it out, patching the roof where 2 boards had lifted, replacing the doors. I set up a workshop in the back quarter of it, with my table saw and router table and lathe. The smell of sawdust and old timber together is one of the few things in this world that has always made me feel exactly right. I called my daughter the day I moved in. She lives in Chattanooga with her husband. I'll call him my son-in-law throughout this, because that's what he is, for better or worse. She seemed genuinely happy for me, asked about the property, asked if I needed help moving. Her husband got on briefly and said it sounded like quite an investment. Something about how he said that word, investment, sat with me a little, but I let it go. By May, I had a routine. Up at 5:30, coffee on the porch, watch the ridge come out of the dark. Feed the 2 chickens I'd acquired from a neighbor who was downsizing. Walk the property before the heat set in. Afternoons in the workshop. Evenings on the porch with a book and whatever was left in the coffee pot gone cold, which I've never minded. My daughter called every week or 2. The calls were good. She asked about the garden I was starting, laughed when I described my ongoing conflict with a groundhog who had discovered the bean seedlings, told me about her work at the pediatric clinic where she's a nurse practitioner. I didn't think much about her husband during those weeks. He was a background figure in my life, pleasant enough at holidays, ambitious in a way I'd never quite connected with but didn't begrudge. The first call that gave me pause came in late June. My son-in-law called me directly, which was unusual. He usually left the family communication to my daughter. "Hey," he said, "been thinking about your place up there. Have you given any thought to what you're going to do with the barn?" "I use it as a workshop," I said. "I told him that when I moved in." Right, but I mean long-term. Because I've been doing some research, and barn venues are absolutely exploding right now. Weddings, corporate retreats, farm-to-table dinners. You've got the acreage, you've got the mountain backdrop, you've got the creek. With the right build-out, you could be pulling in $15,000, $20,000 a month in event revenue during the season. "I'm not in the event business," I said. "I retired from working. That's the point." He laughed in the way people laugh when they think you've said something naive. "Warren," he said. He'd always called me by my first name, which I'd never asked him to, and which had never entirely sat right. "You're sitting on a gold mine, and you don't even know it. This isn't about working. You hire a manager, they handle everything. You just collect the checks." The barn is my workshop, I said again. I appreciate the thought, but I'm not interested. There was a pause. Just think about it, he said. I've already made some calls. Already made some calls. I set the phone down on the porch railing after we hung up and looked out at the pasture for a long time. The phrase turned over in my mind like a stone you keep picking up to look at the underside. My daughter called the following week. She seemed a little careful, the way she gets when she's navigating something she doesn't entirely want to be part of. He's really excited about this idea, she said. He thinks it could be a real opportunity for both of you. For both of us, I said. He would manage everything. You wouldn't have to do anything. I know what he's proposing. I told him I wasn't interested. She sighed. I know, Dad. He's been reading about these barn venues, and he's convinced it's a good idea. Could you just hear him out more formally? He wants to come up and walk the property. I thought about saying no. Instead, I said he can visit, but my answer on the barn isn't going to change. They came up the first weekend in August. My daughter hugged me at the truck and seemed genuinely glad to see the place. She walked the garden with me and admired what I'd done with the farmhouse. My son-in-law moved through the property with a different energy, the way a contractor walks through a house he's already planning to renovate. He stood in the middle of the barn for a long time, turning slowly, looking up at the timber frame. The bones are perfect, he said. You'd need to pour a proper floor, run electrical, add climate control, build out a catering kitchen, but the structure is already there. I've been talking to an event planner in Knoxville who specializes in barn venues. She thinks this location is a top-tier candidate. You've been talking to someone about my property. Just exploratory, getting a sense of the market. My daughter was looking at the barn wall, not at either of us. I don't want a venue in my property, I said. I want a workshop. I want to make furniture and feed my chickens and sit on my porch. That is what I bought this place for. My son-in-law's expression shifted into something patient and slightly condescending. He was 41 years old and had worked in commercial real estate development for 15 years, and he wore that experience like a credential he expected others to defer to. Warren, he said, you're 64 years old. Property taxes on 11 acres aren't cheap. The farmhouse needs a new roof in the next few years. I noticed the ridge line when we pulled in. I'm talking about setting you up with an income stream that covers all of that, and then some. I'm not asking you to do any work. I would handle the management. I've already started building out the business plan. There it was again, the sense that decisions had been made about my property in rooms I hadn't been in. I've said no twice now, I said. Once to you on the phone and once just now. I'd like this to be the last time. He looked at my daughter. She didn't look back. We had dinner that night that was mostly quiet. They drove back to Chattanooga the next morning. My daughter squeezed my arm at the truck and said she was sorry, in a tone that suggested she wasn't entirely sure what she was apologizing for. I went back to the barn and stood in it for a while after they left, with the morning light coming through the gaps in the siding, the smell of sawdust from the workshop section, the sound of the creak through the open door. I thought about Eleanor, who would have said something quietly accurate in about 8 words, and then gone back to whatever she was reading. I pulled out a legal pad, old habit from lesson planning. I've kept them all my life, and wrote down the date, the conversation, what had been said. I don't know exactly why. Some instinct left over from 38 years of dealing with teenagers and parents who sometimes remembered things differently than they happened. August and September were peaceful. I finished a dining table I'd been building from walnut slabs I'd sourced from a mill in Maryville. I put up green beans and tomatoes from the garden. The groundhog and I reached an uneasy truce after I relocated him to the wood line on the north side of the property. I watched the leaves turn on the ridge, which happened in waves. The maples first and then the oaks, and I thought that I had never in my life seen anything so uncomplicated and good. I didn't hear from my son-in-law through September. I told myself the matter was settled. On the second Saturday of October, I drove into Townsend for groceries. At the hardware store on the main road, there was a community corkboard near the entrance. I almost walked past it. I don't know what made me stop. There was a printed flyer printed on glossy paper, the kind you pay for at a print shop. The photo on it was my barn. My barn, photographed from the south pasture with the mountain ridgeline behind it, taken on a clear day in late summer. Blue Ridge Hollow event venue. Rustic elegance in the heart of the Smoky Mountains. Weddings, retreats, private celebrations. Now booking for 2026, starting at $3,500 per event. There was a website URL and a QR code. I took the flyer off the board. My hands were steady. I am a person who learned to work with sharp tools, and one of the first things you learn with sharp tools is that panic is more dangerous than the thing that caused it. I sat in my truck in the parking lot and scanned the QR code. The website was professionally built. There were 6 photographs of my property, the barn interior shot through with afternoon light, the creek, the view from the pasture toward the ridge, the covered porch of my farmhouse captioned as a guest gathering space. There was a booking inquiry form, a pricing page, $3,500 for a half-day event, $5,500 for full day, $7,200 for a weekend package, and a calendar showing the venue as available for booking beginning spring of 2026. A contact email, blueridgehollowevents@gmail.com. No phone number. No owner name listed. I drove home the long way on the county road that follows the creek for several miles because I needed the time and the familiar road before I walked back into my house. I called my daughter that evening. I told her what I'd found. There was a long silence. "He's been really working on this," she finally said. "He thinks once you see it all put together, you'll understand the vision. The vision is his. The property is mine. Do you understand the difference?" Another silence. "Dad, I need you to understand that what he has done is not a business proposal. He has advertised a venue on my land without my knowledge or consent. He has built a website using photographs of my property that he had no right to use. He is soliciting money from people for events that I have not agreed to host and will not host." She was quiet. "I need you to tell him to take it down, all of it, tonight." She said she would talk to him. The website was still up the next morning. The flyer was still up at the hardware store when I drove back to check. Someone had pinned it back up, or had put up another one. I took that one down too. I called a property attorney in Knoxville, whose name I'd gotten from a neighbor who dealt with an easement dispute. Her name was Judith Crane. I got her assistant on a Monday morning and had an appointment by Wednesday. Judith Crane was direct in the way that good lawyers are direct, which is to say, she didn't waste time on things that didn't matter, but she also didn't rush past things that did. She reviewed the website screenshots I'd brought, printed out. She reviewed the flyer. She reviewed the notes I'd written on my legal pads, dates, conversations, exact words as best I could recall them. "What he's doing is straightforward misrepresentation," she said. "He's advertising a commercial venue on property he has no ownership interest in and no legal authority to commercialize. He's soliciting bookings and presumably payment for events that you have not consented to. That's fraud. What are my options?" She walked me through them. A cease and desist letter immediate, an injunction to compel him to take down the website and all marketing materials, civil damages for unauthorized commercial use of my property and likeness, depending on whether he'd already collected any payments, potentially a criminal referral for fraud and wire fraud to the Knox County DA. "I want the website down and the marketing stopped," I said, "and I want documentation that this happened, because I have a feeling this isn't the last time he'll try something." She nodded. "I'll have the cease and desist drafted today." I spent $400 that afternoon at an electronics store in Knoxville, 2 security cameras for the barn, 1 for the farmhouse driveway, 1 covering the pasture approach. A neighbor's son who does IT work helped me get them set up and connected to cloud storage. By Friday evening, I had 4 active cameras and 2 weeks of rolling storage. The cease and desist went out via certified mail and email on Thursday. It was thorough. Immediate removal of all advertising materials. Takedown of the website and all associated social media. No further use of photographs of the property. Acknowledgement that he held no ownership or management interest in the property. Refund of any payments collected. Response required within 72 hours or civil action would commence and criminal referral would be made. He called me Friday night. "You sent lawyers after me over a business idea?" You built a website advertising my barn as a rental venue without telling me. You put flyers up in town. You solicited bookings. I was developing the concept. I was going to present it to you when it was fully built out. I thought seeing the whole picture would bring you around. I told you no, twice. In person and on the phone. Warren, this is family. You don't lawyer up against family over a misunderstanding. Take the website down, I said. Refund any money you've collected. Remove every flyer and listing. If you haven't done all of that by Monday morning, Ms. Crane files for an injunction and makes a referral to the DA. You're overreacting. Dad would have wanted. Don't, I said. Don't use them. Don't use any of them. Take the website down. I hung up. The website was still live Monday morning. I texted Judith Crane, proceed with everything. She filed for the injunction Monday afternoon. She also made a referral to the Knox County Sheriff's Office, where a deputy named Alves, thorough, unhurried, the kind of man who writes everything down twice, came to the farmhouse on Tuesday and took my statement. I showed him the website, the flyers, the cease and desist, the legal pad notes, the timeline. He asked whether my son-in-law collected any payments. I don't know, I said. The website has a booking inquiry form. Whether he's taken deposits, I can't say. He made a note. We'll find out, he said. That Tuesday night at 11:47, my driveway camera caught a car I didn't recognize, pull in and stop. My son-in-law got out. He walked to the barn and tried the door. I'd put a new padlock on it 2 weeks before. Another thing I'd done quietly without announcing it. He tried the farmhouse porch. He stood in the dark pasture for several minutes, looking at the property, then made a phone call. He stood there talking for a while, his voice not audible through the camera, and then he drove away. I watched the footage the next morning over coffee in the quiet farmhouse kitchen, with the ridge coming into the light outside the window. I sent the footage to Judith Crane and to Deputy Alves called the next afternoon. We've confirmed he collected deposits from 3 separate inquiries through the website, total of $4,100. Given the cease and desist that was in effect when those deposits were collected, that significantly strengthens the fraud case. My daughter called that evening. She was crying, which I had expected and which still cost me something to hear. He says you're destroying his career, she said. He did this to his career, I said. I said no, I said it clearly, and I said it more than once. He made choices after that. Dad, he has a family. We have a family. I know that, and I love you. None of this changes that, but I cannot let him do this. If I let it go now, what comes next? She didn't have an answer for that. The injunction was granted the following week. He was ordered to take down the website, remove all marketing materials, and cease all commercial activity associated with my property. The 3 families who'd paid deposits were notified that the venue was fraudulent and their money would be refunded. 2 of them called the sheriff's office themselves to file complaints. The website came down. The flyers disappeared from what I could find. The booking calendar went dark. 3 weeks later, Judith Crane called with an update from the DA's office. They were proceeding with charges, obtaining property by false pretenses and fraudulent misrepresentation. Given the documented evidence, the recorded cease and desist violation, and the victim complaints from the depositing families, the DA was prepared to offer a plea, suspended sentence, 2 years probation, full restitution of the deposits plus damages. He took the plea in January. My daughter called me the night before the hearing, which I didn't know about until it was over. She said she'd needed some distance to think. I told her I understood and that I meant it. I don't know how to do this, she said. He's my husband and you're my father, and I don't know how to be in the middle of this. You're not in the middle, I said. You're the one person in this whole mess who didn't do anything wrong. You can be angry at me and you can be angry at him. And both of those things can be true at the same time. She was quiet for a moment. Are you okay up there? I'm fine. I had a good morning. Finished the seat for a rocking chair I've been building. The chickens are well. There's a fox that's been coming to the edge of the tree line at dusk. I've been watching him. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. I'm glad you have the chickens. After he hung up, I sat on the porch until the stars were fully out. November in the foothills is cold in a way that clears the head if you let it. And I sat in it and thought about Eleanor, who had a particular way of waiting out hard things, not passive, not resigned, just patient in the way of someone who trusted that the shape of things would eventually become clear. The shape of this was becoming clear, I thought. The cost of it was real. My daughter caught in something she hadn't asked for. A son-in-law who would carry a record and a reputation now because he decided my refusal was an obstacle to go around rather than a decision to respect. A family that had bent, not yet broken, and might not break, but would be different. I went back inside and made a cup of tea and stood at the kitchen window looking out at the dark pasture for a while. February brought ice, which glazed the pasture and the barn roof and the creech stones and made the property look like something from a painting. I spent 3 days inside with the wood stove running, finishing the rocking chair, reading, watching the ice melt by degrees in the afternoon sun. The fox came every evening to the tree line. I'd started leaving a little something for him, not enough to make him dependent, just enough to make him feel the arrangement was mutual. My daughter texted in late February. Could she come up for a weekend? Just her. She needed to see me, and she needed to be somewhere quiet. Of course, I texted back. The spare room's ready. Come whenever. She arrived on a Friday evening, later than she'd planned because of traffic on I-40. She looked tired and something else. Not broken. My daughter doesn't break easily. She gets that from her mother, but wrung out in a way I recognized. I made soup, and we sat at the kitchen table and didn't talk about any of it for most of the meal. Eventually, she said, he's moving out. We're figuring out what comes next. I'm not ready to say more than that. I nodded. You don't have to. I don't blame you, she said. I want you to know that. I'm not saying that to make you feel better. I've thought about it a lot, and I don't blame you. He made decisions. He kept making them after you said no. That's not on you. I appreciate you saying it. She looked around the kitchen. The same way our mother used to look at a space she was taking in properly for the first time. At the wood trim I'd replaced, the shelves I'd built, the hand-thrown pottery mug she'd sent me for my birthday, sitting on the counter. Mom would have loved it here, she said. That's why I bought it, I said. We used to talk about finding somewhere like this when I retired. I just wish she'd made it. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and we sat with that for a minute in the way you can only sit with things when you've known each other long enough not to need to fill the silence. The next morning, I got up at 5:30 and made coffee, and she was already on the porch when I came out, wrapped in the old quilt I keep on the porch chair looking at the ridge in the dark. I handed her a mug and sat down. The light came up slowly, the way it does in the mountains. Not suddenly, but in gradations. The ridge first against a dark sky, then the tree line resolving, then the pasture, then the creek glinting. A pair of deer came out of the wood line and crossed the far corner of the pasture without hurrying. She watched them until they were gone. I could see why you fought for this, she said quietly. I didn't say anything. Some things don't need a response. We sat there until the sun was fully up and the mist had lifted off the ridge and the chickens had begun making their morning noise from the coop at the side of the barn. Then she asked if she could help with anything, and I said there was a section of fence along the east pasture that needed restringing if she wanted to work outside, and she said she did. We spent the morning that way, working and not talking much, and then talking in the easy way you talk when your hands are busy with something simple. She left after lunch on Sunday, hugged me for a long time at the truck. I'll come back in the spring, she said, when the garden's going. Anytime, call first. I like my quiet. She laughed at that, really laughed. The first full laugh I'd heard from her all weekend. It's a thing I'd said before, apparently. Enough times that it had become a kind of shorthand for something between us. After her truck disappeared down the county road, I went back to the barn. The workshop was cool and smelled of walnut shavings and linseed oil. The rocking chair sat in the corner, finished, waiting to be moved to the porch where I intended it to spend the next several decades. I ran my hand along the arm of it, checking the surface, the way I'd done 1,000 times with student projects over 38 years. The wood was smooth. The joinery was solid. The proportions were right. I carried it out to the porch and set it in the spot I'd planned for it, angled toward the ridge. Sat down. The fit was good, the way a well-built chair always fits. Not soft, but right, like it was made for exactly this. The fox appeared at the tree line at dusk, same as most evenings. He looked toward the farmhouse for a moment, then went about his business in the last of the light. The ridge went dark by degrees. The first stars came out. I had protected what Eleanor and I had planned for, and it cost something. It always does, when you hold a line against people who expected you to fold. My daughter was finding her way through something hard, and I couldn't carry that for her, only be steady enough that she had somewhere to land when she needed it. My son-in-law would carry the consequences of choices he'd made freely, and I had stopped wasting hours trying to decide whether I should have handled it differently. Some things you don't apologize for. The chair was mine, the land was mine, the quiet was mine, not because I was stubborn or difficult or afraid of change, but because I had spent a working life building toward it and had the right to keep it. I sat until the cold came up properly, and the stars were thick over the ridge, and then I went inside to put on another kettle, and the farmhouse was exactly what I had made it, warm and mine, and enough. I think about the legal pad on my kitchen table a lot, that yellow notepad where I started writing down dates and exact words after the first phone call, not because I thought I'd need it in court, though I did, but because 38 years of teaching teenagers had taught me something quietly useful. People who plan to take advantage of you are counting on your memory being softer than theirs. Writing things down was just honesty, a small act of moral clarity in a situation that was trying to make things murky. What my son-in-law did had a clean shape to it once I stopped trying to make it complicated. He asked. I said no. He asked again. I said no again. He decided my no was a temporary obstacle rather than a final answer, and he built an entire commercial operation on top of that decision. The cause was clear. The effect followed directly from it, not because I was vindictive, not because I wanted to see him punished, but because fraud has consequences regardless of who commits it and who it's committed against. When the sheriff's deputy sat across from me in my farmhouse and said, "We'll find out what payments he collected," I felt the weight of that. Not satisfaction, just the particular heaviness of watching something become real. I've thought about what it takes to hold the line against someone who's counting on you to bend. It isn't anger. Anger burns fast and makes you sloppy. What it takes is something quieter, the kind of clear-headedness that lets you see exactly what's happening without flinching from it. I saw what he was doing from the first call, when he said he'd already made some calls about my property. Already. That word did the work of a whole paragraph. I wrote it down that evening. I kept writing things down every time the picture got clearer. Eleanor had that quality. She could read a situation accurately when other people were still sorting out their feelings about it. She didn't mistake kindness for weakness, and she didn't mistake steadiness for coldness. She knew the difference between leaving a door open and failing to close one that needed closing. I tried to handle this the way she would have. Not by escalating, not by cutting people off before they'd shown me who they were, but by being honest about what I was seeing and acting on it when I had to. My daughter said something to me on that February morning on the porch, watching the deer cross the far pasture. She said she could see why I'd fought for it. I've turned that sentence over many times since, not because I needed the validation. I'd already made my peace with the cost of it, but because it named something I hadn't put into words. The fight wasn't really about the barn. It was about whether a person gets to keep what they built, what they planned for, what they carried through hard years because they believed it was worth carrying toward. That's not a small thing. That's most of a life. The rocking chair is on the porch now. I made it myself. From walnut I sourced 20 minutes from here, jointed and finished with my own hands. It holds the weight of a person and it doesn't shift. That's all a well-made thing needs to do. Some mornings I sit in it before the light comes up, and I think that the work of a life, the real work, not just the earning but the becoming, is learning to build things that hold. In wood. In character. In the quiet knowledge of what belongs to you and what you owe the world in return for having it. The fox comes to the tree line most evenings still. I'll leave a little something. The arrangement is mutual.